on one level we know about impermanence, but on the other we don't. So here Padmasambhava is saying, pay urgent attention to impermanence. And the real reason for that is because if we're aware of impermanence, we know that there isn't time to waste. Thank you, Virinaga, and very lovely to be with you this evening. You've made it in from the last of the summer weather, possibly. So what I'm going to do tonight is look at the text that we just heard at the beginning of the meditation. So this is it's called the advice given to the 3 fortunate women before the departure, although we're only going to hear the advice given to the first of the 3 women. The other 2 will have to wait for another day. So this text comes from it's in 2 volumes, a big book called The Life and Liberation of Padmasambhava. So Padmasambhava as Indian sage it's a semi-historical figure. So he's sort of historical, but there are also a lot of legends around him. And he's said to have been around in the 8th century of the Common Era, and he's particularly associated with helping Buddhism to be established in Tibet. So he's originally from northern India, but he was invited to Tibet to help establish Buddhism there. And in the text it refers to him as the Guru, that second Buddha. So in the Tibetan tradition he's often referred to as the second Buddha. So the first Buddha was, of course, the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, who lived 2,500 years ago, who first, as far as we know, gained enlightenment and set off the whole tradition of Buddhism, the Buddha Dharma. So technically speaking, a Buddha is somebody who discovers enlightenment through their own means, when there isn't anybody else who's around to teach you how to become enlightened. So it's a bit funny in some ways that Padmasambhava is referred to as the second Buddha, because the teachings of the first Buddha were still around. But one way of understanding this is that Padmasambhava is particularly associated with transformation of the depths, of the deepest parts of one's psyche, the really difficult, intransigent parts of our minds. You get a lot of stories in the life and liberation of Padmasambhava of him converting demons, and we can understand demons as being like the forces in our own mind that are very difficult to tame, if you like. So Padmasambhava is particularly associated with this. So it's a bit like the first Buddha comes along, presents the Dharma, but it's like when we start to hear about the Dharma, or in particular when we start to practice the Dharma, it's likely that we'll come across difficulties. It's likely our mind will throw up trouble for us at some point along the way, and that's when we need Padmasambhava. That's when we need the second Buddha. So there's a lot more could be said about him. Actually, we're going to be exploring more about Padmasambhava. We've got a weekend retreat coming up this weekend. We're going to be exploring more about Padmasambhava. So so what, as I said, I'm going to do is just go through this text and sort of explain it a bit by bit as we go along, and then I'll aim to leave some time for questions towards the end to explore it a bit more. So it starts with, then Ngangung Chung, the glorious noble queen, invited the Guru, that second Buddha, into the temple of turquoise, dedicated to her tutelary deities. Piling up on a precious throne fine silks, and tables of divination, and regaling him with many pleasing things, she greeted him respectfully and made this request: "Give me a few words of great import, an effective verse which I can memorize. Though I've not renounced the world, I would like to cherish within me a doctrine which at a later time would lead me to Buddhahood." So the first thing to say here is that the Queen is very respectful towards Padmasambhava. And so she invites Padmasambhava to her special place, her special shrine, and she makes him very comfortable, and she offers him presents. She regales him with many pleasing things. So what this is pointing to is an attitude of receptivity. It's like if we're not receptive, we're not going to be able to, well, it's true about anything new. If we're not receptive, we're not going to learn it. And that's very much the case for the Dharma. If we don't have a receptive mind, we can't open to something new. There's a kind of a famous little Zen story of when a professor goes to visit a Zen master, and of course, because it's Zen Buddhism, you have tea, and it's like Sri Ratna, actually, we usually have tea as well. But so the professor's obviously rather full of himself, but anyway, he comes to see the Zen master and asks the Zen master to teach him some high-powered Zen philosophy. So he said, "Oh, we'll just have tea first." And so the Zen master starts pouring the teacup, and he just keeps pouring and pouring, and it starts filling up, and then it just starts overflowing. And the professor goes, "What are you doing? It's like, my cup's overflowing." And he says, "Well, if your cup's completely full, you can't take anything in." So in other words, it was that thing. If we're not receptive, we're not going to be able to take something on board. We're not going to be able to take something on board. So the Queen demonstrates this very much, and even though she's a queen, she demonstrates this real attitude of receptivity. She wants to learn, and she approaches Padmasambhava and asks him for a teaching. She says, "Oh, I've not renounced the world," so she's still living as a queen. She'd like to cherish within her a teaching, a doctrine that at a later time will lead her to Buddhahood, to enlightenment. And what we then get is the teaching from Padmasambhava. I find it a very, very beautiful teaching. It's basically a teaching about meditation. And one of the things that's very lovely about it is, if you read the rest of the life and liberation of Padmasambhava, I mean, it's great, but it's like almost bonkers in parts. I mean, you get these wonderful sort of stories, and all sorts of incredible things happen. Not so much like, sort of concrete teachings that you can easily take away and actually put into practice yourself, although no doubt, there are teachings within them. Or you get teachings that it's a bit like a whole scattergun of lots of jumbled up together teachings. Actually, we're going to look at one over the weekend. It's kind of just lots of jumbled up teachings that we'll try and pick apart. But what you get in here is it's got a very beautiful arc to it. So it covers about it. Padmasambhava talks about preparation for meditation. There's a long section that is about meditation and how to work in meditation. And then there's a bit at the end about what do we do outside of meditation or after meditation. So you get this very lovely arc through the teaching. So first of all, we get the section on preparation. So this is what Padmasambhava says. To begin with, pay urgent attention to impermanence. Then strongly turn your mind towards taking refuge and direct your prayers to the lamas. These are the preliminaries without which no means exists. So he's giving three things for her to do. So the first thing is pay urgent attention to impermanence. It's sometimes said that if you were going to summarize Buddhism in one word, that one word would be impermanence. So it's the idea that absolutely everything changes. And of course, we sort of know that. At least we you know, if I was going to ask you, can you think of something that's absolutely permanent and never changes, nobody would be putting their hand up. Tell me afterwards if you. But in a sense, we don't know. We don't know it in our bones. We act as though things are much more permanent than they really are. And then, of course, we get surprised. We get caught out when things change, particularly when things that are important to us or dear to us change, and we don't like the change. So it's like, on one level, we know about impermanence, but on the other we don't. So here Padmasambhava is saying, pay urgent attention to impermanence. And the real reason for that is because if we're aware of impermanence, we know that there isn't time to waste. We don't know how long we're going to be around. We don't know when our conditions will change. The fact that we've all managed to gather here this evening means that we're all at least relatively healthy, and obviously we're all alive. We don't know how long it's going to last for. So by paying attention to impermanence, it's like it's a spur to practice. It's a spur to really make the most of our lives. And from a Buddhist perspective, that is to practice the Dharma. So that's the first thing. It's a sort of motivational line. Pay urgent attention to impermanence. And then he says, then strongly turn your mind towards taking refuge. So taking refuge means putting our reliance on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, putting our reliance on the possibility of enlightenment, the ideal of enlightenment. The Buddha, historically 2,500 years ago, said gained enlightenment. So that's the ideal that we're trying to move towards as Buddhist practitioners. We take refuge in the Dharma, so that's both the teachings that help us move towards enlightenment, but also what's spoken of in Buddhism as reality, as how things are. So things being impermanent, things being insubstantial, which I'll come on to a bit later on. It appears in the text. And if we don't recognize that things are insubstantial and impermanent, then we suffer, that being another characteristic. So we take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and then in the Sangha. The Sangha being the spiritual community, other practitioners, particularly other practitioners who are further along the path than us, who can help us move along the path. So having motivated the Queen by paying urgent attention, he said, and then what you need to do is go for refuge. You need to turn your mind towards the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then direct your prayers to the lamas, so the lamas being the teachers or the gurus. We then get on to the meditation proper. And Padmasambhava says this. And particularly when we go through this next bit, maybe just really notice to see if any of these metaphors or phrases or things that Padmasambhava says resonates with you. So you could maybe just sort of notice that, try and notice that, and maybe tell me at the end which ones resonated with you. So Padmasambhava says, after that, disposing yourself to physically to be calm, as in an empty house, the raindrops slowly gather, relax. Do not force your mind or body. So I find this very lovely metaphor, this idea of a house in which an empty house in which the raindrops slowly gather. So Padmasambhava is really emphasizing the importance of relaxation. Sometimes people, when they're new to meditation, think meditation's about relaxation. It's not really, or at least not from a Buddhist point of view, but actually relaxation is really helpful, can really help meditation to the extent that we're able to do that. So first of all, disposing yourself to be physically calm. So you want to really set up, we want to set ourselves up as best we can in a comfortable position. And one of the things that's really helpful is also to learn to be able to sit very still. The more we can keep our body still, the more that it'll be easier for our minds to become still. But also we need to be comfortable. I often say when I'm teaching meditation and talking about posture, comfort is much more important than looking good. So you don't need to be in the full lotus, even though it looks great, but unless that happens to be comfortable for you. So, as in an empty house, the raindrops slowly gather. So again, there's this idea of sort of relaxation and calmness just slowly accumulating, slowly gathering. It sort of also points to the sort of qualities that we want to try and cultivate to bring into being, particularly of patience. One of the things that comes up again in this text is it's very easy to be too forceful with our minds, particularly in meditation. So we really need a very sensitive, subtle, discerning mind to work in meditation. Otherwise, we just sort of knock ourselves about, as it were, and it becomes counterproductive, which again will show up a bit more later on. So you've got this idea of just really giving yourself plenty of time and space to allow your body to settle, which can then help your mind to settle. So it's often, when one has more time, it's often good to do other things like, a bit of physical exercise, like some stretches or some qigong or something like that, to help to settle the body before you actually sit to meditate. Also, just to prepare your room. One of the reasons we create a shrine is to sort of help try and create a nice atmosphere. But like when you're meditating at home, it's very nice to create your own shrine, to light the candles. It all helps to get the mind in a place in which it can settle. So this is the first part. So do not force your mind or body. And then he goes on to say, since the tranquility of shunyata is the foundation, by forcefully turning your mind to emptiness, you chase misconceptions. So shunyata and emptiness is a translation of shunyata. So this comes back to what I was saying about one of the marks of reality, of insubstantiality. So the idea of shunyata, or what shunyata is pointing to, is that there are no fixed essences anywhere. So we've got Viryanaga here, but you can't actually find an essence of Viryanaga in Viryanaga. so to speak. Ditto Paramabandhu and Paramabandhu. What this is pointing to is, again, it relates to the thing about impermanence. We're a process that's constantly changing. So there's no fixed self in myself or in any of you, I'm afraid to say. I hope it doesn't disappoint you too much. Or you can have a look and see if you can find a self, but I can assure you you won't. Although that is habitually how we tend to think of ourselves. It's like we tend to think of that as like a little person maybe in our head who's sort of like operating the machinery that is in control. But of course we're so little in many ways in control of our bodies and minds because we're constantly changing. And we're constantly interacting with the environment. So although it's useful to have the designation Viryanaga, which I have to say because I gave him the name, but although it's useful to have that designation, it's not absolutely true. It's not absolutely real in the sense of there isn't a fixed, unchanging Viryanaga. There isn't a fixed, unchanging self. So this is one of the big things that we try and do in Buddhist meditation. So in a sense, there are sort of two main aspects to Buddhist meditation. On the one hand, there's tranquility and calm and concentration and focusing the mind. And on the other hand, there's seeing the nature of the mind and seeing the nature of our experience, and that's sometimes referred to as insight. And one aspect that we try to see in this terms of this insight is to see shunyata, or emptiness. So empty not meaning there's nothing there, but meaning that any experience is empty of a fixed, unchanging essence of any sort. So it says, since the tranquility of shunyata is the foundation, by forcefully turning your mind to emptiness, you chase misconception. So the danger of what can happen is in when we're trying to, if you like, look and explore our minds and bodies to see that there's no fixed and changing self, we can get a bit over-conceptual about it, and we can try and sort of grab that understanding. And when we do that, it actually just creates more turbulence in the mind. So we chase misconceptions because we're trying to go beyond a purely intellectual understanding. It's relatively easy, it's hard enough, but it's relatively easy to understand it intellectually. But what we're wanting to have is a sort of deep knowing where we sort of know it in our hearts and our bones, rather than, again, like this thing about impermanence. We all know intellectually that everything changes, but in our bones we don't, because we don't behave that way. So it's the same sort of thing. We're trying to move to really knowing shunyata, know emptiness in our heart, in our bones. But if we try and just approach it entirely, try and grab hold of that understanding, we just create turbulence in the mind. So then Padmasambhava goes on to say, in the thoughts which arise, understanding will come without doing anything. So again, he's sort of pointing to this thing, we're trying to create this relaxed, open space in our minds where this sort of real understanding can just naturally arise without trying to grab hold of it. And so he then goes on to say, again and yet again, work on whatever estranges you from meditation. So I'm sure you've all experienced this. You try and sit in meditation and all this stuff comes up. You start thinking about, oh, what I'm doing later tonight, the argument you had with somebody at work earlier today, wondering about the weather, or, whatever it is. We get all this stuff that comes up in our mind, feelings of irritation, wanting to get things. That's all just the stuff of our minds. And of course, that is what our minds do. So from this sort of meditation, we just notice that, and we just, in a way, put it to one side. So, but without pushing, it's this thing of finding the right sort of gentle, subtle, sensitive effort to work with our minds that doesn't create more turbulence. So he says in the next bit, lay bare whatever arises, good and bad thoughts alike. So in other words, it's a bit like he's just encouraging the Queen to just notice thoughts just arising and passing through their mind. So we sometimes use the metaphor of a blue sky and thoughts as being a bit like clouds, and we just can let them pass through the sky. And what we're wanting to do in a way, or what Padmasambhava is encouraging the Queen to do here, is to dwell more and more in the blue sky, so that the clouds grab less and less of our attention. But we can only do that if we let them go. If we try and push them along, it actually just makes them stronger. Just our minds become cloudier rather than clearer. So we want to try and allow this space that is more and more clear, more and more open. So we lay bare whatever arises, good thoughts and bad thoughts alike. So although outside of meditation, we'll try and cultivate helpful thoughts and helpful actions and try and put aside unhelpful thoughts and unhelpful actions. Within meditation, particularly within this sort of meditation, which is more like a sort of just sitting meditation, for those of you familiar with that, he's encouraging the Queen not to discriminate. They're just thoughts. Whether they're helpful or unhelpful, they're just thoughts. And just let them go. Then he goes on to say, the child who knows his way carries along on the path every harmless thing he happens upon and nothing that harms him. So it's a little bit mysterious exactly what Padmasambhava means by this. But in a way, talking about the child, sort of pointing to, if you like, kind of natural spontaneity. So trying to sort of contact in natural spontaneity. Sometimes meditation is talked about as a creative working of our minds with our minds. So it's like, what we're slowly doing over the days, weeks, years of practicing, sitting in meditation, is in a way getting to know our minds and learning how to respond in a creative way to them. But what this is perhaps pointing to is just doing that in a very natural, spontaneous sort of way. So we just respond to what's there, not what we think should be there. It's very easy to, I don't know if you've had this experience of, you're sort of sitting in meditation, or not even in meditation, and you sort of, for example, you get a lot of irritation, and you find your mind's taken over by irritation, and you think, I just can't manage this. It'd be all right if I had this other problem. If I had that other problem, that'd be fine, I could do that, but I can't do this problem, sort of thing. But of course, we have to work with the problem that arises in our mind, not somebody else's problem that seems like really easy, that they seem to be struggling with. And you think, what's the problem with that? It'd be really easy to deal with that. We have to just respond to whatever arises in our mind. And then he goes on, during the time of insight, which is surrounded by a calm and gentle aura, openness and appearance are inseparable. The six senses come forth, though appearance and voidness are inseparable. This is the real foundation without which no means exists. So during the time of insight, so this is pointing to starting the mind or oneself starting to get a deeper understanding of insubstantiality, of selflessness, of impermanence. And it said it's surrounded by a calm and gentle aura. So I think what this is pointing to is it's like when our meditation goes deeper, or when we get a new understanding in meditation, it's like the mind opens up a bit more, and there's a sense of, you get a sort of little sense of liberation. It's like if we have a new understanding, but it's not really accompanied by a sense of freedom, then it probably isn't a real understanding. So it's a bit like if you're reflecting on impermanence, say for example, you reflect on that in meditation, and if you just start thinking, find yourself getting more and more depressed because you think, well, I'm going to die, my friends are going to die, and I'm going to lose what I like, and I'm going to get ill, and you start, you get more and more depressed. That's not it. You're on the wrong track. So if you're really understanding impermanence, it should be associated with a sense of freedom, of liberation. And here he talks about it's a calm and gentle aura. And then he says openness and appearance are inseparable. So openness is another way of talking about emptiness, of shunyata. So as I said, shunyata is usually translated as an emptiness. In some ways, it's a bit of an unfortunate translation because it makes you think of a big black void, but it's not. It's not a big void. It's as I said, it's this thing of the no fixed essence, no fixed self. So when you start to get an understanding of that, but it doesn't mean that things stop arising. So, thoughts still keep arising. It says in the next bit, the six senses come forth. So the six senses being the five physical senses, sight, hearing, etc., and the sixth one being the mind. So thoughts, images, memories. So when there's this kind of insight, it's not like you stop being able to see things or hear things, or that your mind goes completely dead. So you're still getting appearance, but you recognize that it's without an essence. So they're inseparable. Openness and appearance are inseparable. Those of you familiar with the Heart Sutra, which we recite a lot in pujas, you get the form is only emptiness and emptiness is only form. So form being appearance and emptiness being emptiness or openness, as he's calling it here. So, this is sort of, in a way, sort of fleshing out a little bit of this sort of insight that you're seeing that there's no essence, there's no fixed thing, but yet there's still appearance, there's still things appearing in our experience. And then it goes on, during the period of meditation, there is not anything, it is simply open. So by not anything means there's no fixed thing. It's just open, it's empty. But when you waver towards appearances, delusions will arise. So again, so if you think of yourself, you're sitting in meditation, this sort of big blue sky, you're trying to have this sort of big blue sky of openness, and thoughts, feelings, if you've got your eyes open, visual images, being like clouds that are passing through, sounds like clouds that are passing through your mind. And when you can just sort of sit and watch them go by, then you just have this sort of inseparable openness and appearance. But as soon as you start your mind gets caught up in them, so you're sort of sitting having this thought and that thought, and you can maybe just let them go, but suddenly you get hooked into a thought. Again, if you've meditated for any time, you're probably familiar with that phenomenon. The mind hooks onto it. It's a bit like, it's sometimes called the Lord of Thoughts, because it's kind of like it bosses you around. It's like you can take all these other thoughts. Okay, fine. Yeah, but it's like if you have anxious thoughts and you're worried about I'm going to get home tonight. You say, no, it's fine. It's just a worrying thought, and something else, worrying thought about am I going to wake up in time to get off because I've got to go to work early tomorrow? And you think, it's just a worrying thought. It's fine. And then you think, my partner might be going to leave me. No, my partner might be leaving. That's one of the lordy thoughts when you get sucked in. So this is what Padmasambhava means. When you waver towards appearances, so when you get drawn into a thought, an image, any sensation, delusions will arise. So that's when we lose our understanding and get caught up in the appearance. And then he goes on to say, after careful examination, understand not to discriminate, to neither accept nor reject. As anything can happen, peace will arise from within. So again, very important thing here that's being talked about is learning to just be able to really turn towards and accept whatever shows up in our mind. To not either grab after things or to push them away. All that pushing and pulling, again, just creates turbulence in our mind. And so once we're able to let go of that, or the more we're able to let go of that, again, it's not like a switch, the more we're able to let go of that, the more we can experience peace within, because we're not pushing or pulling on our experience. Again, worth noting that this is all talked about within meditation. So that doesn't mean to say that outside of meditation, you wouldn't discriminate. I don't mean discriminate in the negative sense, but I just mean simply to make judgments, helpful judgments about what is useful and what is not useful. So it's not that we completely abstain from doing that outside of meditation, but in meditation, we're just really accepting whatever shows up and learning to just let it be, and that means that we'll let it pass rather than fighting with it. Okay. Then we come on to the after meditation. So he says, even when you do not meditate, for personal growth you need to exercise effort. So again, sort of interesting that in a way it's all been about non-striving, non-effort, letting things be. This is a sort of attitude that we're sort of trying to create in meditation, particularly this type of meditation, but pretty generally so. But then outside of meditation, we need to make effort. And so what he means by making effort is skillful effort, so skillful actions, actions that benefit ourselves and benefit others. And then if you do so without accomplishing anything thereby, so again it's sort of not being, so when we try and act skillfully, we're doing it for its own sake, not to try and get something from it. It's like, for example, we try and be generous, but, hopefully we're trying not to be generous so that somebody will be nice to us, or, so they'll be, give us something, as it were. So we're not trying to accomplish anything from it. So know that at all times, realization is your own nature. So this is very much a sort of a Mahayana, which this comes from, a Mahayana view, the sort of idea of Buddha nature, the idea that we have, if you like, the seeds within us of realization, of enlightenment. And we can think of, from that point of view, of the spiritual life of one of discovering that within. So know that if you do so without accomplishing anything thereby, know that at all times realization is your own nature, and from within act for the benefit of all beings. So again, a very strong thing can come about this, making effort, but making effort to help to do things that benefit beings. So again, this very strong contrast between how we work in meditation with this very gentle, subtle, refined mind, but outside of meditation, we make real efforts, and we maybe have to push ourselves sometimes to do things to be helpful in this world, to help each other, to help other people in this world. Unceasingly do Dharma actions, so that's skillful actions. When you purify yourself of your faults, realization will naturally come from within. So the other thing about this is the more that we act skillfully, the more that we do helpful things in the world, then the less we have to recriminate ourselves. It's a sort of recognized mental state in Buddhism of a mental state of blamelessness, this a very happy mind when you just don't have anything to criticize yourself for because you've acted skillfully. It's a very lovely, lovely state to be in. And that will support, that sort of mind will support realization. And then seal your virtuous actions with prayers and a dedication for the purpose of all beings. So again, it's this strong motivation to want that whatever you've gained is helpful for others and to dedicate your life to help other beings. Without such prayers and dedications, no means exists. So if we see the spiritual life entirely in terms of it's something for me, it's not going to work. It only works when we have a sense that we're actually doing something that's going to be helpful for more than ourselves, and that actually we do things that are helpful for more than ourselves, not just that we've got an idea of it. Not falling into the errors of excitement or passivity, be filled with confidence. So, areas of excitement or passivity, again, it's this sort of thing of finding the right sort of effort. So not getting, like a headless chicken running around trying to take old ladies across the road who don't want to cross the road, that sort of thing. But neither being, passive and complacent. Here, in few words of great import, lie preparation, enactment and fulfilment, the doctrine's deepest reaches of this life as of the life to come. So we've had preparation, we've had enactment in terms of the meditation, and then fulfillment in terms of realization, gaining realization. Thus did he speak, and Queen Nagung Chung was led to salvation.
Great, so I hope you enjoyed that Dharma Night talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist Community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a class, a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving, you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set us up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that, and that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.